there's been a time, they've had an understanding that anything could happen between 6 to 12 months of them actually being fully activated. That's the bit that's crucial, because we're aware that something is going on, something major is ahead. And they're saying that their sense was, from particularly the remote viewing, is that things may really, everything may be turned on its head in 6 to 12 months because of these space arcs. And maybe, just maybe, that's the event.
Right now on Higher Journeys with Alexis Brooks. Well, at long last, everyone, we are back. We are back. I was just talking to, as you can see on screen here, my dear friend Mary Rodwell. So delighted to have her back for what I'm going to call the first show, first comeback show, since I'm sure some of you have heard I have made a move. I'm now at an interim undisclosed location, and hoping to be moving on to another location to be determined shortly. But it's great to be back, and I'm delighted to be back with you, Mary Rodwell. So much is going on, guys. She started giving me a download on some stuff that she has heard from some pretty heavy inside sources, of which Mary has quite a few. And I said, stop right there, Mary, because I want you to share with the journeyers what's going on. There's a lot of activity, as I'm sure you all know, a lot of moving parts to what we're seeing on this planet right now, metaphysically, physically, multidimensionally, 3D. It's all there and it's happening now, and I know you can feel it. So, Mary, without further ado, welcome back. I want to get right into it. Before we get into a discussion on the walk-ins, we are going to be talking about that. But Mary, you had some pretty heavy intel to share with me, and you feel fairly comfortable in talking about it with our audience today. So I'm going to say, go for it. Tell us what's happening with something that you're referring to as space arcs.
Yes. Well, a lot of talk over the last few years has been about the event, something that is going to literally shift our paradigm. And that in itself has been intriguing, because nobody's quite sure how to translate what does the event mean. And this may or may not be connected to it, but it's certainly enough around the whole story that intrigues myself and many others. And it started primarily about, I hadn't heard anything to do with space arcs at all. And I was working with a lovely lady in Canada who had experiences with a family, her friends, which she didn't realize at the time. She had an experience on board a spacecraft where she was shown around, but she also saw some of her closest friends on the spacecraft as well. And she thought it was all a dream, until the next morning. Some of them actually then rang her up and said, we dreamt that we were on a spaceship. And she said, well, I also dreamt we were on a spaceship. So that was confirmation in a way that something very unusual was going on. But what she wanted to understand more than that was a message that she'd been given that she couldn't remember. And she said, and it was an important message. And she said, Mary, can you help? So I did a regression with her. And what we discovered was something that connected to what we call past lives, a mission. And this mission that she was aware of when she went into it was that in Atlantis, she was with some of these closest friends that she saw on the spaceship. And they were all incarnated at that time and were working as light workers on Atlantis. And she said, and there was a message about that she needed to know about because of their mission now. And it's all to do with something we call, lots of people are calling the shift, the change, the shift in paradigms. What does that all mean? And she was shown some symbols that she realized were somewhere very close to Bimini. And these symbols were on what she believed to be some kind of space arc, which has been there for a long, long time, obviously around the area that was Atlantis. Mm-hmm. And what was interesting was that she started to say there's something about it being activated. Now, I knew nothing about space arcs. I knew literally this was news to me until I start, literally as synchronicities have it. And I always find it quite amazing how information comes to me from various sources. And it was literally within a week or so, I came across Dr. Michael Sala talking to a whistleblower, JB, who was talking about space arcs. And I was fascinated because it was all about these space arcs being activated. And there's a number around the world, including in Ukraine. And the reason he's saying that there's so much going on in Ukraine at the moment and so much being pushed is that the US want these space arcs, these activated space arcs, because of the technology. But also Putin knows about it because there's one in Russia, and he wants to take control of these space arcs in Ukraine because of the potential of what they are, because they are activated by consciousness, and they're being activated now at this time. And apparently there's others all around the world as well.
Wow. When you say activated by consciousness, I mean, we know that's such a broad word and we're still grappling to understand what it is. What do you mean activated by ET consciousness? ET consciousness?
No, human consciousness. What the sense is that when we reached a certain level as humanity, in terms of our consciousness and our waking of consciousness, that triggers or has triggered these space arcs.
I see.
And this is what this wonderful lady who I regressed was aware of, is that they're now all being activated because of our humanity is waking up. And we know this. We know that more and more people are becoming aware of a greater reality. More and more people are, having the activations and then realizing there's more to life than they've been programmed to believe. They all want to be in a new kind of more loving, more heart-centered reality. And all of this is what apparently is triggering these arcs, because it seems like they were put there for this very time. And go on.
Do you have, as you're seeing Mary space arcs, I'm trying to image what they might look like. And you're talking about multiple ones in multiple locations. Do we have an idea of what they would look like? And there's a reason why I'm asking. I'll get into it a bit later. What do they look like, space arcs?
I think they look like craft, huge craft that have within them all this new technology. And there may be more to that I can't disclose at the moment. But there may be more to that, because I've spoken to a group that she's attached to now that are remote viewing these. So they're actually using their consciousness to go there. And what they've seen is this technology, but they've seen other things I can't mention at the moment. I'm afraid I have to get permission first. But
maybe you could do it in our Patreon after show. I won't push you.
Well, the bottom line is, though, there's been a time they've had an understanding that anything could happen between 6 to 12 months of them actually being fully activated. That's the bit that's crucial, because we're aware that something is going on, something major is ahead. And they're saying that their sense was, from particularly the remote viewing, is that things may really, everything may be turned on its head in 6 to 12 months because of these space arcs. And maybe, just maybe, that's the event.
I was just going to say, there's been so much speculation about the event, all these buzzwords that we use, but certainly that is, and one that denotes sort of this activation. I think the term has been used, an event that would trigger the consciousness of the masses to the extent that the masses are. I don't know that it's going to be everybody, but enough to shift the paradigm. And it sounds like this could be what we're talking about. Who's to say? Could be multiple events. Here's what I wanted to bring up to you, Mary, because I'm thinking of a dream that I had. I brought it up on the show before, about 6 weeks, let's say, about 6 or so weeks ago. And in this dream, I recall being in some kind of a structure. It felt like a home on the ground, but I was looking out the window, and what I saw seemed to be a planet that looked like Earth, but I remember referring to it as the moon. I don't know. Let's call it a planet, but a planet the size of a planet literally outside of my window. And I just remember thinking, oh my God, it's really happening. It is finally really happening. The feeling of it was even more pronounced than what I was seeing, but it was right in my face. It was like looking out of your window and seeing a planet that you could literally touch. Now, here's the kicker. I recall very, very clearly seeing what I would describe as craft, but I called them satellites for some reason. They were almost miniature craft that were hovering around this planet in a multitude, hovering, and the planet was moving, like sort of rotating on its axis toward me. But what's key, and I'm thinking, who's to say, but the dreams for many people can be very revelatory. Just like the woman that you regressed and her seeing people that she knew who also had dreams. Are we all having a variety of dreams that may be roughly describing a similar situation, I wonder?
I think you may be absolutely right. And even though we always look on spacecraft as being either cylindrical or triangular or saucer shaped and what have you, we know certain craft can be planetary sized as well. We know that they
absolutely,
are,
yes.
So who knows? And I mean, this is something that came to me. Somebody sent to me something huge coming out of the sun that was, in the perimeter of the sun, like a huge craft, planetary sized. So, I mean, we always look at the limits that we can do in terms of as humans, but we've got no idea what some of these advanced intelligences can actually create. I mean, they go over, vast distances through wormholes and what have you as well. So there's so much technology that human beings are not being educated into deliberately.
No question.
So that they don't know what we're capable of. And if we go into whistleblower material, and I've talked to a number of them, we're talking about portals, stargates, a whole range of things that most of us think are science fiction. But there's so many people, credible, articulate, and I would say very grounded, full of detail of their experiences with some of these particular things we think are just science fiction. And apparently stargates, and they've known about stargates since the 1960s, 1965 onwards. There have been a number that have talked about, the secret space programs. Are they all fantasizing? I don't know.
No.
I don't know.
And I'll tell you, Mary, I think we're at a point in our trajectory with humanity. We know that our audience certainly, I can't speak for everyone, but I'm sure that many of the journeyers watching are right on board with us. I think we're fast losing the propaganda around these sorts of things being sci-fi. As a matter of fact, many would argue that the sci-fi that we've become accustomed to was put there before us for a reason. Some call it predictive programming, slipping the truth in through the guise of fiction, et al. But I think we're beyond. I think overall we're beyond that. And I'll tell you something. The more I talk to people, and I've never been shy about talking about the work that we do, and once we get into the nitty gritty, more times than not, people are fascinated and oftentimes have a story to share. They just can't talk to anyone else about it. We've got to stop that. And I think we're slowly but surely getting to the point where we are accepting that this is a reality and it's going to be in our face. We better pick it up really quick. Look at what we're dancing around here, what could be happening. In this dream, I remember thinking, it's irrefutable now. No one will be able to deny it. Whatever it was I was witnessing, I just remember the feeling of it's all on the table now. Yeah. We're about to hit an event that's going to put it all on the table.
Well, what's interesting for me is how many people have said, I can't be quiet anymore. I have to talk about this. I'm just being pulled into and pushed into disclosing more of what, you know, I've experienced. And it's been quite incredible, the awareness that they've had about a lot of this. And I go back to a really interesting one almost at the beginning of my journey, within a few years of me doing this. I actually worked with a young lady. She was 13 years old, and she'd had some experiences and she wasn't sure what to make of them. And what was interesting was that she'd realized that not only was she having experiences with the little zetas and what have you, what was fascinating was she said, I'm on a planet. And she said, it's, excuse me, it's a red planet, she said. And she said, it's strange because I can see an American flag. And she said, and there's beings under the ground on this planet. And I remember at the time thinking, a red planet, American flag. And oh, she said the last kicker was there seems to be a face here, a big face on this planet as well. And at the time, everything was coming out about the face on Mars. She didn't know anything about that. And what I was thinking is, what is an American flag doing on Mars? But it's no doubt she was talking about Mars. Now, this is a 13-year-old that we were exploring primarily her ET interactions with these little greys. Now, for me, I put it to one box and thought, well, that's a highly anomalous, unusual thing. But I've now, since I wrote The New Human, met a number of children that have been taken on board craft and taken to Mars. One young girl, all of 7 or 8, actually did a drawing of a dome on Mars that she saw, for example, and talked about being shown beings on Mars itself. So all these things, you start to put them together and say, you know, either we've got, you know, very creative kids, but for someone to come up with something like that in a regression all those years ago when nothing about the face on Mars was known or anything like that to her, gave it some credibility. And of course, since then, you know, we hear of others that talk about stargates or portals to other places. And certainly some of the whistleblowers I've talked to, you know, talk about portals on this planet coming from one place to another. I mean, one was apparently in Alaska. There's a portal where they go from Alaska to another place in the US, literally just by walking through this kind of technology. And apparently there's technology all over. So I know this is all very deeply down the rabbit hole. But for me, the credibility part of it is when you've even got children describing things that they shouldn't have any knowledge of whatsoever are coming out with this kind of information. That's pretty compelling.
Absolutely. And this is what you have steadily relied on for so long. And I always love listening to you tell us about the children that are really coming through with some pretty heavy intel. They have no reason to lie. They have no reference. They have no context. Again, Mary, I think we're beyond that. I think we're really, most of us are down the rabbit hole a piece, holding hands at this point, all of us. The question is, what's that next revelatory moment? Now we're talking about stargates, we're talking about DUMBs. We know what those are, right? Deep underground military bases, and perhaps some of these stargates being located in proximity there, and the technology that may exist there. I mean, we can go back and talk about bless his heart, Sergeant Robert Dean, who we lost several years ago. I remember Bob Dean. You remember?
Yeah.
I think you may have worked with him. I don't recall, but I know
I've
you
met
know
him a
him.
number of times.
You've
Yeah.
met him. And he, I recall, talked about one of those areas, I believe in Nevada, that it was one of the DUMBs that had an elevator that went down many, many levels. He himself, I don't believe, was on it, but was told of an individual that was brought down quite a few levels underground in Nevada, went through some sort of something.
Yeah.
It seemed to be a Stargate, because here's where they ended up, in Pine Gap.
Yes.
Australia.
Yes.
That was probably my first acclimation to such high strangeness,
Yes,
right?
that's right.
But we've heard so many whistleblower testimony in that regard. And that's not to say all of it's true, but there's something going on. Clearly, there's something going on. If you're enjoying this episode, along with all of the subjects that we cover here on Higher Journeys, then I invite you to join our members-only community on Patreon, where we go even deeper into the conversations with the guests that you know and love. Not only does your membership ensure that we can keep this work going and growing, but you'll also get immediate access to our exclusive after shows. Get up close and personal with the guests of the show, along with many other member perks. So click on the link below to join now, or visit higherjourneys.com where you'll find the Patreon link. We'll see you on the journey. Thanks.
One other thing that was interesting to me. Now, this is some years ago. This is in around 2000 when the US went to war with Iran, and the whole Saddam Hussein side of things, and they were saying that there was weapons of mass destruction there and all that kind of stuff. At the same time, I was connected to a wonderful lady in England who, amazing clairvoyant, and she said to me, Mary, just to say to you, I've been told that it's nothing to do with weapons of mass destruction, other than the fact there's some ancient artifacts that are technology that they have, or Saddam has, that if he can access it and what have you, could be highly dangerous because of it's ET technology, and it's quite what's the word? Could give him a lot of power, because if he accesses it, then it's going to give him a really important position in the world politics and what have you, in terms of what it will give him. And she said, this is what the being said to her, that if that's why the whole war was orchestrated, to get that technology. And of course, we did know that Baghdad Museum was raided as well as part of that. Now, I heard this from her and I'm thinking, oh, it's pretty interesting. Goodness knows whether it's got any value or whatsoever. I happened to know a guy in American intelligence at the time. So I just emailed him out of interest and said, this is what I've been told by a clairvoyant in England. Is there any kind of value to this information? He wrote back to me, short, sharp letters. Mary, don't write about it. Don't talk about it.
Here's your answer.
Don't ring anyone about it. Completely avoid talking about it, because you could be in deep trouble.
Well, I hope you're not in deep trouble today, because you just talked about it.
But it's a bit late now, isn't it? This is
there's
20
your
years
answer.
ago now.
Well,
so.
Yeah. There's your answer when people give those sort of nebulous but very it's not what you say, it's what you don't say. It's clear that something is going on there, and it seems like in so many of these historical events, Mary, we're told that they're taking place for one reason. I'm going to be very, very homogenized in the way I use my words here. We're told that these events are happening for one reason, for one motivation, when it very well could be another, like what we're talking about here, including the current events that are going on right now.
Yeah.
I want to talk about CERN. I'm going to go for it. We talk about portals. Everyone is at this point is familiar with what's going on, or what has been going on, and apparently what's been ramped up more recently with CERN in Switzerland. Do you have any intel on that? Do you have any thoughts on what's happening and how that might be playing into some of the things we're talking about right now? What's happening at CERN with the Large Hadron Collider?
I haven't got any whistleblower intel. Only I've been, like most people, interested in what are they actually doing. And my sense is that they are playing around with creating some kind of perhaps wormhole portal technology, going accessing other dimensions. And the big concern for that, for most people, should be, what are they going to let in? Not just what will they, what can they let in with that? Because I believe that might have been the same thing with the Philadelphia experiment in 1943, where they said they created a rip in time and let in a lot of very certainly not benevolent entities and what have you. Whether that's true or not, Al Bielek was involved in that. Of course, he's not with us anymore. I met him a number of times, but it's certainly his account of being on the ship and it going through when they created the rip in time, and they went through to 1980. And he was with his brother Cameron at the time. So this is maybe this is a similar kind of thing, that they've created a similar kind of technology, only on a greater scale than the Philadelphia experiment. I wouldn't be surprised, but again, I got no personal intel on that. There's just others that have come and spoken about this as a possibility. So I just think that that's what they're doing. They're playing God in my book.
Trying to.
We are going to, and I suspect that if these activations of these arcs are going to continue, and we get to know more about our history, maybe this is why they're being activated, because we're playing with fire. And the reason we saw so much activity with more craft was as soon as we had the nuclear bomb and we had nuclear weapons, then everything was accelerated in bringing in new generations of more awake humans to actually give us the awareness of what we're doing in real terms. Because we've been like a 3-year-old with a loaded gun that can kill, not realizing that what the damage that's done. And these intelligences have said, you're not just affecting this particular planet, you're affecting us in the dimensional realms as well. That's not okay. And I believe it might be part of the reason this activation is happening now is because of the consciousness of humanity. And that can go one of two ways. We can actually go more into the technological side and using this for harm, or to activate our higher consciousness and a responsibility we have to all sentient life, which is, what seems to be happening more and more. So we are here at a very, very significant time on multiple levels.
I agree with you.
And it's all coming out. So I suspect we're going to have some really, it's just, everything's going to be turned on its head, and a lot of people are going to find themselves in a whole new world.
I think you're right. And I think a lot of people are feeling it, whether it's through dreams, whether it's in some cases physical symptoms, particularly the sensitives that are getting, we've talked about this on the show many, many times, a myriad of physical symptoms, not to mention the fact that astrologically, planetarily, we're going through some really, really heavy dips and curves with just the planet, the alignments that are happening, the conjunctions that are happening, all of it at once, and none of it by accident. So it's a tough, bumpy ride, but we're there. I think we're absolutely there. And as far as CERN, I'm going to say this, I'm going to stop talking about them. Yes, the inference that they may be trying to play God, no question, but what they've done in the process, or what they may eventually do. My question is, have they already done it? Have they already opened, ripped into space-time and already brought in perhaps some not so favorable creatures in the process? Hence the reason why so many other things may be going down right now, accelerated. I've thought about that. What's here right now, I can't say for sure, but the sense that I have is that there's something that's not supposed to be here that's here right now. What do you think, journeyers? I'd love to hear in the comments. I really, we can only speculate, but going on feeling alone, I feel like the damage may have already been done. Not that it can't be reversed, but yeah. Let's see how we can fold the walk-in phenomenon into this conversation. I'm sure if anyone can do it, you can, because that's when I reached out to you. That's something that I wanted to touch on, because you were I'd still say one of the relative few people that have really dug into the walk-ins, particularly as it relates to the ET contact phenomenon and even past lives. Let's see if we can draw a nexus point here. What first of all, I want to go back and let's start with this. If you could tell the audience, for those of you that may not know, what the concept of walk-ins is, and then we'll go from there.
Well, my understanding, walk-in, soul swap, there's lots of different names that are given to that phenomena. And there are lots of people that just feel after a certain experience very, very different to how they did prior to that. And it may be they had a near-death experience, they may have had a serious accident or some life-changing trauma where suddenly they feel very, very different. And in terms of how different they feel is like they've got the memories of themselves prior to the walk-in experience, but they've got no emotional attachment to them. They've got a whole different feeling and a different behavior to how they were previously, and not always understanding why. But I'll talk about one particular lady who was a walk-in to a 3-year-old young girl. And she explained to me that she remembers being on a craft. It was, she was 9 foot tall, blonde hair, blue eyes, they were telepathic, and their food was light. And the next thing she remembers is being in this little girl's 3-year-old body, human body, having to learn how to talk and having to learn how to eat. So that was one form of walk-in. So, but there are others that are older. They may have had a traumatic event of some kind, an accident or whatever, and they'll feel different. And it's often through looking into that on a spiritual level, they realize that they were not the same soul. The understanding is that souls have an agreement sometimes that they will share the human container. And in other words, one may be in there, the soul might be in there for a period of time, like 14, 20 years or 21 years, having this significant event. Well, they'll vacate. And because the human biological body is still functional, they'll allow another soul in who has a mission, has a purpose, has something to do. And they've come in at that time rather than not needing the childhood experiences, for example, and coming in as an adult so they can do their mission or their purpose. And they will feel and want to behave completely differently to the soul that was prior there. But there's another form that I've come across where someone, excuse me, has shifted, and they call it a walk-in, but it's not quite the same. It's when they call in more of their soul self because of what they have to do, needing more of that essence to complete their task. So they may, the way that I have tried to understand it, and it's my own way of talking about it, it's like saying the soul is like the palm of your hand. Aspects of you are living other experiences and what have you. But if the job becomes to the point where you need more of your understanding, awareness, insight, higher knowledge, you'll bring in more of that aspect of yourself. So you give yourself a boost, if you like, of more of that essence, that awareness, that knowing. And it can feel so dramatic. It feels the same kind of thing like a walk-in, but it's not. It's just more of you and your higher self or your oversoul coming in. So that's another, I mean, it just gets.
There's a lot of nuances to it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I, as I've listened to you, we have talked about this before. As a matter of fact, on the last Patreon after show that we did a year ago, we spent a little bit of time on the walk-in phenomenon. And we know a few people, I'm not going to name any names right now, that feel themselves to have had a walk-in situation. I know I've asked you before, I'm going to ask you again in terms of, we think of soul swap or soul exchange. Some people may call it even an overlay in some cases.
Yeah.
What possession versus walk-in?
Okay.
It seems as if there's some similarities, but when we think of classic, demon possession as an example, or spirit possession, what would be the difference here with that versus a walk-in as you're explaining it?
Well, First of all, there's something called overshadowing, which is different to possession. For example, my understanding of possession, I've met a few people that I believe were possessed by an entity that basically controlled them through getting them to behave in a certain way. So they would be told what to do. They may have even believed it was a spirit guide or something or other, but the difference is that it was very negative in the sense of what it would tell you to do. It would order you about, it would threaten you, and it wouldn't allow any free will. So that's the difference between a spirit guide who suggests things, encourages you to trust your resonance. It's like a good friend and a negative friend. You know, the good friend is you always feel good around them. They're supportive, they're helpful, they'll guide you, etc., etc., and they will never try and control you. Whereas the negative friend, you always feel less empowered, that you don't feel so good around them. You feel like you're being controlled, but you don't know what to do about it. And I have met some that are aware of this, but somehow feel empowered by that energy that is attached to them and don't want it to go, because it gives them some feeling of power or strength. So that's the difference. There's something called overshadowing, which is when you're in a relaxed state and a guide or a teacher may come in and use your physical body and voice to talk to whoever it is or bring through information or whatever.
More like
and
channeling.
Yeah. And your consciousness can be moved to one side while that happens, or you can literally your consciousness can vacate while that happens. Bashar's one where the consciousness vacates.
That's right. Yes.
I've experienced overshadowing where my consciousness was moved to one side, and the voice may change a little bit, but there's a kind of it's hard excuse me, it's hard to explain really, other than it's an energy that you feel that's basic. For a while you're allowing to use your vocal cords and your physical body to convey something, and it can feel a bit strange to start with, but it's not like they stay with you. It's a temporary thing to convey a message.
Right. So this would be somewhat different than the walk-in phenomenon that you're talking about.
Completely different.
I'm trying to think of where I want to go. I know where I want to go, but there's so many different questions within the one question. It would sound like when it comes to the possession phenomenon versus walk-in, the main differential is agreement versus non-agreement, taking over someone out, against their will, versus making an agreement even on an unconscious level to have the soul of this person vacate for the other one to come in. That would be one delineator, if you know what I mean. In other words, someone that is taken over by a malevolent entity, I doubt they're agreeing to do that. So there's a force there, in the possession versus the walk-in. Whereas in a walk-in, would you say that in every case, it is an agreement at some level? Both souls are agreeing to make this exchange?
The walk-in is where there's been an agreement on a soul level for the soul to switch, because the other soul maybe just needs to be in a physical body for a certain length of time to do whatever it is they've chosen to experience. And they've done their job. They've experienced what they needed to. They've got a perfectly healthy vehicle, and they're allowing another soul, and it may be a soul in their soul family, in their soul group, that they're saying, I'll be in this particular body till I'm 15. I've achieved what I want. By then, you're welcome to then come in and have this physical body. The thing with possession is an interesting one, because I have come across that there was no doubt they were being controlled. But there was part of them that didn't want to let that go, because it made them feel somehow more empowered, even though part of them didn't want it on one level because they didn't like to be controlled, but on another level, it made them feel strong and powerful. And I've met a few like that were fully aware that this wasn't healthy, but they didn't want to let it go. And I'm one particularly that I talked to, because it came in during a meditation, prior to a meditation, where suddenly this woman was taken over, and by this being that called himself the Antichrist, by the way. And basically, I was talking to this, and he was saying, and this entity, which I don't believe was anything like the Antichrist, just said that to scare everyone around. And I remember them saying to me, they're staying, and the soul that was in there wasn't going to have any more to do with the body at all. And I'm saying, well, that's not true. You're going and she's coming back. And we had this dialogue where I was saying, you're going, you know, so it was, this is what was actually going on. And I said, you are going and she's coming back. I'm staying, you can't, you know, all this kind of stuff. And we had this, we continued to have it. But in the end, the entity moved back and the woman came back, and she wanted to work with me about other things. And I said to her, first of all, though, you've got to close down, you know, because you're allowing in these kinds of frequencies that are going to continue to control you. And she didn't want to. She didn't want to close down. And I thought, well, she's made a choice then for some reason, that she preferred to be like this than actually be free from that. Because the truth is that some people don't, there seems to be kind of trade that they like, otherwise they would close down from it. And those that are susceptible to lower entities are often those in fear, or those in ego that can attract that frequency. So if you're, they're the two things that call in that frequency. And, you know, when our energy field isn't healthy for some reason, if we're on drugs or alcohol or whatever, it's more of an opportunity then for these entities to access you, because you're on a frequency they can access you. So they can come in, and, you know, we hear about people, you know, that got, you know, plastered with some drug, or where you hear of drug addicts seeing entities or feeling controlled by them. They truly are.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah, absolutely.
And they do things they wouldn't normally do.
This makes me think about what we've been through, and we've been, it seems like we've been saying for the last 2 years, soon we'll be able to say the last 3 years, and how much alcohol and drug abuse has gone through the roof.
Yeah.
And you can only imagine, if the theory that we're talking about is correct, how prevalent other entities messing around with a lot of people, a lot more people, because of so many being marred. And not everybody, of course, but, you know, isn't it interesting that during lockdown, liquor stores here, at least here in the country, were considered an essential business that could stay open?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You know what I mean,
Yeah.
juniors? So you have to ask yourself the question, is that by design? Is that by design? Maybe some realize being on that frequency, what that will attract.
That's it. Well, it's a, you know, the feeling of isolation, the feeling of, you know, being abandoned, and the fear is one of the most powerful frequencies for such entities to connect to. Because when you're in fear, you shut down. You shut down from expanding, tapping into your source. And with that fear, they can actually access you, because you're in that frequency that they can access you.
Fear, the sense of loneliness, of anger, of apathy for others, all provide a smorgasbord for a whole litany of energies to come in and just feast. And I think that's exactly what they've been doing. Okay. That's, you know, we don't want to stay on the negative too long, but these are all the things that are happening right now at the same time, along with these beautiful things, going back to the space arcs and the activations that could trigger the event. That's a good thing. There's just so much happening right now. What are have you talked to any of the children recently? I think I've asked you this before over the last couple of years, and what their sense is about what's happening right now.
I'm not sure whether did I mention Amy me. I'm just seeing if I can find what she said or what she was told, whether or not I can actually find that right now. Let me see if I can find it.
Okay.
Oh,
I
just
think
2
you've talked
minutes.
about Amy before.
Did I talk about Amy?
I think you've mentioned Amy before.
Oh, I know what I will tell you. This isn't from the children, but this is the message that this lady was told, that she finally found out what it was, about. Her name's Beth, and she was told by the when she finally recovered the message about what she knew she'd been told but couldn't remember, and it was from a past life in Atlantis. She said, this is the message. In the past life in Atlantis, we failed. And this was what she accessed. The beings call themselves the teachers, and also some are the Arcturian Council. We are your parents, you are our children. To evolve is to choose correctly the love frequency above fear and greed, open hearts and unity. The darkness will try and divide. We need to wake up the people to show them that they have a choice to serve the greater good, not fear, ignorance. Namaste. Earth will be part of the galactic community, no longer in fear, which is an illusion, to rise above it and see the lie. Service to others and lead by example. Time is short. Evolve and choose correctly. New Earth is bright. You have a place in the galactic future. We love you. And she was told that she was a bringer of light. So I think that's a pretty nice message that she recovered during her regression about now.
That's powerful. We have to hold on to that. And again, know that everything seems to be happening at once. As you read that, I couldn't help but think about Dolores Cannon's New Earth.
Mm.
I brought this up several times. I've always tried to imagine how she was explaining it, that this new Earth or this new planet, this new Earth would emerge concurrent with the old Earth. Could we be talking about literally another terra firma somewhere else? Not somewhere else. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or was she talking about dimensionally?
Yeah.
That's always kind of puzzled me. And the message that you just read kind of sparked that in my memory. You know, a new Earth, and Earth is part of the galactic family, not in the hellhole that we're in right now.
No.
Something's going to have to emerge out of the ashes in
Yeah.
order to be a part of that. I don't know. It's a big question. What do you see?
I think you're spot on in the sense. My sense has always been, and something I remember Zach mentioning, and I repeated in the book, The New Human, was about it's a dimensional shift, and the new Earth is already there waiting for us. Is how he put it, waiting for us to join it, and that's how I see it too. Is that it's there. And we just need to be in the right frequency to move and join it.
It's already there.
Yeah.
And perhaps already inhabited. Maybe it's just, these are people that are there for the, they get the early bird. I'm being a little bit facetious, but in some way I can see that. Because we are operating based on what did Tesla say? Energy, frequency, and vibration is everything. And frequency standing out amongst all of it, really, for me. The new Earth isn't maybe another planet per se, but a frequency that's overlaying, or maybe the matrix is overlaying it. They coexist.
I mean, I will be talking about more of her journey and what she saw on the craft in terms of new plants that they are bringing to Earth and what have you in a presentation I'm doing for Portal to Ascension next month. But I'll actually go through more of her story, as well as talking about more of the past life connections. And one of them is about the Sasquatch and a gentleman that was communicating with the Sasquatch and saying they're star beings as well. And he always felt very connected to them and wanted to know for sure. And I did a regression with him, and he's had 3 lifetimes as a Sasquatch himself, including his wife. So that was why he's so connected to them.
Wow. I recently heard the Sasquatch come up. I believe I'm going to call out Kara Cassidy. I believe she was talking about the history of the Sasquatch and how, not just the history, but the presence of Sasquatch now, and how they're also referred to as Sas. There's kind of a hidden story underneath the Sasquatch as well, but there was another name that they're referred to. Anyway, it came up recently, so that's interesting. You should bring that up. Wow. Well, listen, Mary, we're going to wind down for the main show. Everybody, you know where we're going next. We're going to go on over to the Patreon after show. Please come on over, support Higher Journeys, and let us take the conversation a little bit deeper for a little bit longer. But Mary, in the interim, you just gave us a little hint. You got something coming up with Portal to Ascension. Shout out to, is it Neil? I believe it's Neil. I did a talk for him several years ago. He does great programs. So we'll have you check that out. The website, I always get this wrong. Well, it's maryrodwell.com, right? But you've got several URLs that lead you there.
Well, acern.com.au, ACERN. That's the most common one as well. But the Alien Lady is another one.
The Alien Lady, of course, the Alien Lady. When are you writing another book, Miss Mary? Speaking of which,
numbers of people that ask that. I don't know, because I need to be clear about what the focus needs to be, and I haven't quite got that focus. What is going to be helpful? Because each one was complementing the other, and I want to make sure whatever it is complements the two previous ones. So I haven't yet got that sense of what it is, but I'm sure it will come to me, and I won't be let off the hook.
It will come to you, and you shouldn't. I agree with you. You've got to let it. You've got to be motivated by something, or something's got to inspire it. I think there's going to be a lot. Maybe it's the event, guys. Maybe it's the event.
Could be.
At any moment, feels like it. At any moment, we could be facing something so magnanimous, dramatic, a little scary, but in that is something grand, and I'm holding on to that, and I know you guys are too, journeyers. In the madness is the magic, and whatever it is, we're right in the thick of it. It's coming, and it's coming quick. Mary, keep us informed, will you, my dear? Always appreciate you. Don't go anywhere. We're going to go next door. For now, we're going to say ta-ta to the journeyers. Please come join us, but if not, join us back here for the next Higher Journeys with Alexis Brooks. And I'm so glad to be back with my buddy, Mary. We'll talk to you soon. Take good care. Bye-bye. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to watch what's next, plus more to explore. And don't forget to subscribe to Higher Journeys.